Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Brother Retrospective podcast. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and we are here this week to talk about Big Brother 23. This is our 23rd retrospective in a row. Quite frankly, at this point, they're not feeling like retrospectives anymore. They're more like, hey, remember yesterday? But we're here to talk about Season 23, and with me to talk about it is Aysha. How you doing, Aysha?
Hello, Taran. I'm excited to be back talking about Big Brother. There was a period of time, I think it was maybe like January or February this year, I was like, I kind of miss Big Brother. Like, why does it feel like it was so long ago?
Big Brother
Uh,
Canada.
that's exactly what it was. I felt it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, even just getting into Big Brother 23, it's a nice reminder of this entire season. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yes. Well, before we jump into Season 23, we have some unfinished business from Season 22. All Stars 2. Aysha, I had the audience vote for who the top 3 players, who should be on the poster for Season 22. Who do you think the audience voted for?
So I think obviously you have to have Cody, no matter how people feel about his game. The game was so centered around him. And then obviously I think you have to have Davon. I don't think there's a world that people are not voting for Davon. The third one though is the third one is tough. I know it's not Memphis. I know it's not Enzo. There are people you can rule out. I know it's on Christmas. But I'm wondering, I think it's somewhere in between Kaser, Janelle, Nicole. And so I'm just like, are people really voting for Nicole? Even though you would think that she would be somebody that should be like, when you think of Big Brother 22, you should be thinking about her. I don't know. I think I'm just I'm gonna go Janelle.
All right. Well, if I could give you my theory on why it is the way it is, I
Oh.
think that ultimately it comes down to who had the best exit from the game, and that of
Oh.
course is Nicole.
Okay.
Cody, Nicole, and Davon. I also will convey an apology from the graphic artist who makes these, who said, "Sorry, the pictures from that season suck."
Yeah.
It was really hard to make this.
No clue why they needed to phone that in, but it was just like a choice that was made.
I mean, I guess they didn't want to add additional humans, but
People.
like
Yeah.
literally anybody could, like, they could have taken their own photos. It would have been fine.
Honestly, yeah. If they self-submitted, it would have been better than what was what we
Maybe that's
got.
what happened. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, that's it. This is season 22, but we will also have a poster for season 23. I'm very interested to see who makes this poster, because I feel like theoretically you have a lot of options. At the very least, you have 6 people in the alliance, only 3 spots in the poster. So
I think it for arguably the best alliance in Big Brother history, you would have to make an exception and have 6 people on the poster.
That's a fair argument. However, it defeats the purpose of the vote.
True.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll work something out. All right. Well, that was Big Brother 22, but we are here to talk about Big Brother 23, 1 year after Big Brother 22. The first, really, I think of, I think that you can sort of start to classify different eras. There's one way to look at the modern era as kind of like 20 plus, but there's certainly another very strong argument for saying season 23 is the beginning of a new era. And I think that is sort of widely accepted to be the case. And a huge part of it is it's fresh off of, COVID and an all-star season. Another big part of it is that it's the first season after the casting mandate, which meant that the entire nature of like what it means to be a person in the house at all really has changed, and it will forever sort of change the dynamics, or at least currently, while they're still doing it, it changes the dynamics of how the game works in the house. So, of course, the cookout ends up sort of really putting a stamp on it.
Yeah.
Or in case you didn't know, things are different now.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like, okay, this was my second US Big Brother season covering as a podcaster. Big Brother 22 was the first. So it's kind of wild to think about, wow, 5 years, so much has happened, so much coverage of so many shows. But thinking back to Big Brother 23 and how exciting it was in just even the formation of the cookout, because this is on the heels of Davon giving her big speech, shouting out all of the past Big Brother Black players who have played before her that have paved the way for her to get there. And it's like she played in a season where it's just like, she had Bailey this season, and then what, Big Brother 18, she had Zakia. And it's like, oh, just, I have my one person that I think it Big Brother 23 happening when it did and the way that it did, because I mean, they could have done anything. They could have done, 6 Mexican players, or they could have done, anything like that. But I think in the nature of Big Brother, because there's always that one, they always make sure they cast at least one Black woman and then one Black man. And so it's always been this narrative. And we've seen it happen of just like, it's very difficult to find your footing because there's just, you don't naturally just relate to people and just in your lived experiences. It's like Black players before Big Brother 23 had to kind of go out on a limb and kind of find those common characteristics they have to other players. And then okay, now it's more comfortable for us to kind of start getting to know each other and see, how we relate. Whereas you get 6 Black players this season, I think they chose the right 6 too, because they couldn't have predicted that this would happen, obviously. But if one person was different, they could have had a completely different agenda. Like, yeah, okay, we're doing the cookout, but I've been waiting my whole life to play Big Brother. I'm going to do what's in my best interest. The fact that it was just this perfect mixture of people that were just like in it just enough to be like, all right, I recognize how unprecedented this is, so we have to commit to this no matter what, was kind of bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, I think another sort of obviously there's a lot of context to this season, including the murder of George Floyd the year before, and just the country as a whole that exists.
Right.
But specifically, there's also some Big Brother context. One of which is there's never been a Black winner of the show, at least the regular season. Of course, we had one on Tamar, who won Celebrity, was the first Black winner to win a U.S. Big Brother season. But that was not the same show, right? Not the same exact show. And so that was something very important. In addition to that, I believe it's something along the lines of in the previous 10 years before Big Brother 23, or something close to 10 years, David was the Black player who had made it the furthest in the game in All Stars 2 when he made it to 8th place of 16 players. Prior to him, before him, until like you get to who is it, like Kalia, I think, there's no Black player who even makes it halfway, who gets into the top half of the season. David becomes the first in almost 10 years to even get to the halfway mark and then evicted immediately. And so there's some context, right, to this idea that that the cookout, comes into this house, they see each other, and whether they know that stat or not, they know the general gist of this, that it's gonna be tough. And the idea that they could potentially work together, potentially protect each other. Initially, it is just to kind of like get to the halfway mark. Like, let's get past the point in which most of us tend to be eliminated.
Mhm.
You can absolutely, I think, see and understand why this happens so quickly and so naturally.
Yeah, I mean, because you, it's one of those things where, and I've talked to like my like non-black friends about it. Like when I walk into a room, I immediately know if I'm the only black person. Like it's just something that you're aware of. It's just something that like growing up, you just condition yourself to be like, okay, I'm walking into this space. I just automatically know if I see someone like me, okay, now it's like, okay, a little bit of a sigh of relief and just like, okay, I'm not the only one. Because when you're the only one, that's when it's like, oh, I go to work, I have to code switch because I'm afraid of like the impression that it's going to give to someone else if I say a word a certain way, how I would say it, outside of work or whatever. And so walking into this house, them seeing each other, like it's whoa, 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 like that had to be just so eye opening. Even just knowing, like, okay, I see, uh, you know, even if they like, even just seeing one, because I think it was Ozzo was on stage with, I don't know if it was Hannah or Tiffany, but even at that point, like before you've seen the entire cast, I know that was like, oh, okay, this is cool, one person. But to see six, it's kind of like written on the wall for you that y'all have to, it's on y'all to do something about this because it's like right here on a silver platter. Let's see how it plays out. But the fact that they were just like, look, we got to look at, because I came in here worried about myself. I came here worried about myself. We have to look out for each other to make this change. I think it's just like one of those, it just happens so naturally. And even rewatching it and seeing like how early it happened, even though it took them a little bit to include Hannah in the edit, like include her in the list of people. It's like, that's the fact of life, is that you just naturally are just like, oh, I see my people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can see even just in the photo, just like it's a very different photo than most of the ones we have been looking at,
Yeah.
like, so uh, so with all of that context, we come into Big Brother 23. Um, maybe minor fun fact here. This is the season that people suspected that I was going to be on this season.
Oh yeah.
I was not going to be on this season.
Where were you?
I
Why?
just moved and had no things. I had no stuff
Right.
and no reason to be online.
Right.
um, and then of course, very famously in the exit interview with Frenchie, he said that he was expecting me to be on the cast based on the rumors before he went on, and that he would have targeted me if I had been on the cast.
As one of the meaty men.
Of course, yes. I'm too meaty.
Yeah. I mean, you are pretty fit. I think that people on the podcast don't, or people just listening to the podcast don't know that. But yeah, you're an active guy.
I'd say I'm pretty fit. I think like if you put me up next to like a Christian,
Yeah, oh,
I
yeah.
don't think I'm gonna be like that threatening, but
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
I'd like to think so at least.
Right.
uh, but so yes, they come into the house, and immediately they are going to be divided into groups, into teams. This is the first of many twists this season.
So many.
Yeah. So basically, how this worked in this season was that they competed in different groups. The winner of each group became the team captain, and then they chose teammates based on like a brief like clip. Wasn't it like they showed like 2 clips and they were like,
Yeah.
choose between these people?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that was their way of being able to kind of like influence the pool of people that were able to be picked for each team, while still giving the captains the ability to choose, and also giving the players themselves the ability to sort of make their own case via the video message. I think this was like fine in terms of a way to divide the teams. It felt relatively fair, I guess.
It did. It's also funny how the team shaped out though, because it made sense. Like, of course, Tiffany is a queen. Like on the queen, like, and of course, the combination of Frenchie, Big D, Ozza, and Brittany are jokers. Like, it
And
made so
Xavier's a
much.
king.
And Xavier's a king. Of course, that makes sense. I thought that was so funny that it just ended up working out that way. But I felt like that was the most fair way to do it. You didn't have to worry about like a schoolyard pick where someone just wasn't picked for whatever reason. It was just one little thing that they could base, their decision on. I like that.
Mm-hmm. So yes, ultimately it's the teams divide out. I'm not going to name all of the teams because that's just going to be a lot of names in a row. But the most important team right now is Frenchies, the guy I just talked about before, who would have loved to target me. And his team was himself, Ozza, Brittany, and Derek F. And this team ends up in the back room, the one that I guess not most recently anymore, but like that the Suri kind of went into. I never
Yeah.
know. Everyone calls it a different thing every season, but it's the room that tends to be the most isolated, and that
Mhm.
tended to be the case for this team, especially once Frenchie left. The remaining players from this team kind of just chilled in there for the rest of the season.
That's where Big D liked to just kinda lounge out anywhere you would see. And if you did not know where Big D was, if you were watching the feeds, you knew he was in that corner bed.
Yeah. The other part about this, though, is that he won the HOH that week as well. He ends up as the winner amongst winners. And this means that his team is safe for the week. And also, he is presented with, I don't remember what they called it, some kind of like double up opportunity, like double or
Yeah, it was like
nothing.
double or not. Yeah, to fit with the casino theme.
Yes. This really just felt like such a casino all season long.
Yeah.
Um, and the idea was that if he wins some kind of like solo challenge, he will win safety for 2 weeks for his team. And if he fails, then what was it? He like gives up his HOH or something.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, why would he choose to do it? Like, it was what there were the risk greatly outweighed the reward, I guess, because it was just kind of like, why would they show that they are, good at competitions, even
Mm,
though, you know, uh, at this point it seems like, oh, they're so good at competitions. Why would they give up HOH, or risk that, or stand the chance to give up HOH? And this was also when, even though he passes it up, Julie's like, well, can you do it still? Because I guess they just had time
and
in
then he
the
did it.
episode. Yeah.
He would have got safety. And the funny thing is that I think most people agreed like it was probably the right call to step away and not do this. However, totally different game if he does it.
Yeah,
He ends up
exactly.
evicted in that week that he would have been safe.
Exactly. Oh, but yeah, but it was like he got it with like 1 second left. So I could imagine like stakes, or if he was competing in a world where he wasn't going to be safe, like, or he was about to lose his HOH, then like you might perform differently once you
Mhm.
know there's something at stake.
True. It's also being pointed out in the chat, the first season to really start the trend of very terrible first HOHs.
Yes.
That you know, we're gonna go from Frenchie to Daniel next season, and then who's the first one in 25? Of course, what was her name? Man.
Jack.
No,
Oh, it was a
it was
woman?
it was the like Riley, thank you.
Oh, yes.
That's the problem. That was the first HOH winner of that season. And then of course Angela in the most recent season. So quite a streak of bad runs of first HOH, Riley being the best of the bunch there.
Taran,
And also the least memorable and didn't do well.
right. I do have to say, I did not realize we were live until you said that just now. And now the stakes are higher. Now I'm like, I've talked about this on podcasts before, that just like when you're on a live podcast, it's hot. You're just like, as opposed when you're just recording, you know.
Aysha was crushing it, but now the pressure is on and she is going to mess up.
Now I'm nervous.
I've had conversations with people about this, about like what's going on here, and what is the reason for it. And I do think that one reason for it is that season 22, by season 22, many people in the like online community had been beating the drum. Winning HOH, winning the first HOH is good for you. We know this now.
Yeah.
However, season 22 was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back on that. Like when Cody had that first HOH and then never let go of control that entire season, I think the notion that winning the first HOH is good for you like went mainstream. And so now, instead of all of the players that would normally throw the first HOH because they were like, I'm smart, I think you should throw it, when really that was not necessarily the best idea. Now all of those players are all gunning for the first HOH because they think it's going to fix their bad gameplay. Yeah. Not that they think they have bad gameplay, but like they think that, if I have the first HOH, I'm just gonna crush.
Right.
And the reality is, not everybody can handle the first HOH.
Right. Because they saw Cody create this structure around him in the first HOH, people like Frenchie and people like Riley are like, oh, well, that's the way to do it. And it's just like, well, yeah, that was Cody, who also played with Derek, who also was coached by Derek before playing again. Like there's skill there that is also required in order to, it's just not like, oh, everybody's going to flock to me because I'm the first HOH.
Mm-hmm. And to be fair to Riley as well, like without Suri that season, that first HOH week probably does go pretty well for her. And then, then the other people are the other people. It's like, I think they were always going to have a bad first week, regardless of their position as first HOH or not. So Frenchie as the first HOH is quite a character. He immediately is going to start to talk about. He is really like the epitome of the online like fan, right? Like he's not like your typical super fan who comes in knowing all the stats. No, he's like a Twitter stan.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. A fan from like Reddit or Twitter.
Exactly. And he's coming in like, I want to take down the bros, the meaty men. I'm not putting up a woman. I'm going to protect the older people in the house. Like
Frenchie was 34. And he was like, I just want to show the older people, can really do it. Taran, you and I would be one of the older people.
Yeah, I'm 33.
Yeah, we're 33.
Yeah. Do we look the same age as him right now? I don't even. Right. I feel like my perception of how I look is totally skewed. I feel like I'm constantly seeing people that are the same age as me, and I'm like, That's not me, right?
I do think 33-year-olds used to look a lot older when
Yeah,
we were younger.
especially yeah, previous generations. I feel like I bet we'll look really, really old to future generations because we'll be such outdated styles.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, we're 33 going on 25.
Yeah. um, so he has all these sort of high-minded ideals about how he wants to play the game and how he's going to operate as the first HOH, and he sets his sights on one Brent Champagne, who man, I'm nailing these slide transitions because these people are so clearly who they are, even in the smallest of thumbnails. He wants to go after Brent because Brent seems like the meatiest of meatheads, and I think, to be fair to him, he's not too far off.
Yes.
However, after speaking to Brent for the first time, really, he changes his mind. They have a heart to heart. Brent opens up about, like, I don't even remember what. He's basically just like, "Hi, Frenchie. My name is Brent Champagne, and I am a human being." And Frenchie was like, "He's like an actual person, and I like him. What am I supposed to do with that? I thought I was supposed to just be targeting these people, and now they're like being people."
Right. I'm like, yes, Mr. Twitter Big Brother fan. It's like he approached this game as if it was one of those like Twitter fast games that people used to play, where you just like you would just play it through a Twitter account, and these are all faceless people. You don't build relationships. You're just like, I want to target this person. That's it. And then the fact that he had this one conversation with Brent, and it's just like, oh my gosh, there are feelings behind this man. Like, come on. That's why you don't set your sights on just like this random criteria. There was no point that Frenchie approached this game from the team's perspective, thinking like, okay, which team is the strongest? Like, who do we want to weaken? It was just like meatheads. I don't care. Let's just line them up.
Yeah, and just to be clear, he had this conversation with Brent and changed his mind after explaining to more than half the house that Brent was his target. And not only was Brent his target, he had this whole plan in his head. I think it was called Frenchie's Wake or something. It was supposed to be like a play on Dan's funeral, where he was going to like really like he was going to promise Brent something, then blindside him, and it was going to be this big devastating thing. And then he has one conversation with Brent, and he has to kind of go back to those people with his tail between his legs and be like,
just kidding.
I'm calling it off. And
yeah,
the eulogy to Dan's funeral. Yes, thank you. So instead, he wants to go after Christian. Yes, because he is the next biggest meathead on the cast. And he's also starting to get suspicious of Christian and his relationship with Alyssa as a showman. So he's like, okay, so I failed on the meathead thing. Then Christian ends up winning safety through the wild card competition, which we'll talk about very shortly. So we can't even go after Christian anymore. So what is the other thing that Twitter? Oh, showmances. I'm the showman's killer.
exactly.
Christian and Alyssa will be cut short before they can even really begin. But I know it. I see it. I know that they've begun.
He dropped every Big Brother buzzword. And it was just like, I know they had to be eating it up. Like that, eating it up, like production had to be eating that up the first week, because not only was he giving them that, all these like touch points, all the different like typical targets, but he was in the diary room just giving the countryest of sayings with every single explanation, which is another thing. He's like, I need to be loud in the DR. I'm sure he thought that. I need to be loud in DR. I need them not to forget that I'm a farmer.
Yeah. through all of this, he is going to create the Slaughterhouse Alliance, which is the sort of initial power structure. He ends up including Brent in this, amongst many other people. This alliance did not include Tiffany. However, later there is going to be another alliance after the Slaughterhouse Alliance basically abandons him for all of his chaos. He tries to sort of retreat and pivot into the alliance that is called French Kisses, which is him and a bunch of the women, including Tiffany. Him and Tiffany had a bit of a like low-key connection, again, as the older people on the cast. And I never even questioned that when I watched this too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was his attempt at an all-girls alliance. When it's just like Frenchie.
Exactly. He was like, what else does Twitter want? An all-girls alliance. But I'm not a girl. That's fine.
It's like, how do I get in this? Oh, if I start it, they can't kick me out.
Yeah. So okay. He was initially targeting Brent, but he pivots to targeting Christian because of Christian is in a showmance. And then Christian and Alyssa have to go and explain to him that we're not in a showmance. And then later they are in a showmance. But it's fine because Christian is now kind of the target. But this is the problem. Another twist. The wild card competition, which allowed people to win safety and also give safety to somebody else, was like an added thing in this particular one. Christian wins safety, gives safety to Xavier, not thinking that Alyssa would need a safety here, or even that Alyssa was his showman's partner yet. And so Christian's now safe. Oh boy, this is starting to look like Cody's HOH from season 19, only self-inflicted, because now Frenchie has to choose another target. And if you don't remember exactly what happened in the first week, you might be expecting me to finally talk about the week one boot, which was, of course, Travis, the next biggest meathead on the cast. If you thought that was the next step, you are in fact wrong. You don't remember it correctly. I don't blame you, because the next target was actually one Derek X, who I am going to struggle to find because he's way further down in the season. But Derek X becomes the next target. Why, do you ask? He doesn't seem that meatheady. He is in good shape. Well, it's not because he's a meathead. It's because in Frenchie's mind, he started imagining that Derek X was creating all kinds of different alliances and structures, when in reality, he was just kind of chilling and had no idea what was happening on the show because he did not know the show.
He was still learning like what a veto was. So it was like the projection that Frenchie was doing at this point was like, okay, if I'm thinking about all these things, he has to be. Because look at him. He's so charming. He's fit. He's like in socially with everybody. He's probably already got it down pat, like strategically. Which is just hilarious because like Derek was somebody that had to like find his bearings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Derek becomes the next target. Now, at this point, Alyssa has been nominated with Kyland on the block. And so Derek X becomes the backdoor target for the week because he, again, just purely out of nothing, out of nowhere, Frenchie has been convinced that Derek X is a mastermind that is campaigning against him and will need to go. This is, none of it's true. It was entirely invented in Frenchie's mind. But Derek X becomes the new target. That's when Derek X wins the veto.
For the first time.
And it's like, okay, all right, Derek X has now saved himself. Now it's time to talk about Travis, right? No. Because the next target is Kyland. There's a whole thing going on that Kyland is not like super happy with how things went down. He's close to Derek X. He gets into a little bit of an argument with Frenchie. Frenchie thinks that Kyland was threatening him. They get into a whole thing about it. And now Frenchie is kind of thinking he might want to target Kyland, but Derek X is close to Kyland and wants to use the veto on Kyland. And Frenchie doesn't want that to happen. At least initially. And so then a bunch of nonsense happens. Derek X decides, screw it, I'm using the veto on Kyland because I like Kyland and I don't want Kyland to be in danger. Kyland wouldn't have been in danger this week. He should, well, based on the momentum of the week, he would have been safe anyway. However, the veto is used on him regardless. And that's when Frenchie decides he needs to nominate Travis.
He's like, I'm out of options. Frenchie was so stressed this week, all self-inflicted. Like, no one made him do this. No one made him make all these promises. No one told him not to, no one told him to say, I'm not going to nominate a woman. I'm not going to nominate any minorities, and then proceeds to do so.
Alyssa and Kyland.
It's just like, come on.
And then the next target was Derek X.
Yeah. He's just like, he is the reason that he was so stressed for no reason. It could have all been so simple. But he did it to himself.
Yes. So ultimately, the thing about Frenchie is that through all of it, through all of the, failed promises and chaos, he did actually end up sending out a meathead.
Right. He's like, whew. My original objective complete.
And he did set the tone for the season.
Poor Travis.
Travis, yes,
we didn't really get to know him.
We really didn't. He was buds with Derek X. I've never seen Derek X like another human being more than Travis. And I've hung out with both him and Claire at the same time, so that's saying a lot. Travis, he just seemed like he was. I mean, there's I think a reason why he got along with Derek very well, which is that they both really didn't know what they were doing, and they were just kind of hanging out. And he didn't really put up too much of a fight here. There was a little bit of pushback, a little bit of an attempt to try to keep Travis around. There were, of course, some rogue votes thrown in, one in particular by Tiffany. But that was it for Travis.
Yeah, poor Travis. Travis, who pointed out to Julie during his exit interview, oh yeah, I always told that the athletic white guys get out first. Julie's just like, okay.
So of course we've already talked about it, but the strategic time in which this happens, of course, is in week 1. The cookout comes together. Now there's a lot of other stuff happening there. The cookout is a very loose alliance at first. It kind of forms in little pockets in terms of actual relationships versus the loose idea of protecting one another. But it is sort of at this time kind of more a network of people looking out for each other, sharing some information. It is going to solidify more and more over the coming weeks. But even by then, I think we were already talking about it as this seems like in all the chaos of the slaughterhouse and the French kisses and all of this, the cookout seems to be the thing that is stable and has a lot of promise long term.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that could work in a season full of so many twists. In a season that was just built to not just let the players play, they were able to accomplish something that, okay, given our circumstances, given that we are in 4 teams and we have the wild card competition and blah, 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 I think that's what allowed this to work, because they were divided amongst the 4 teams. It was just kind of uh, built into the game already that allowed them to target other people while still not having this firm like allegiance to each other, like not having this like sit down, hey, we all go to the HOH room early on, we got to agree to this, we got to solidify the name together. But I think the teams assisted in allowing this to happen because they already had like allegiances to the other people on their teams, but then those verbal agreements like with the actual cookout like felt like extra protection to them, so it was like no reason to abandon that in these early stages.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, with Travis gone, they go into week 2 where Kyland wins the week 2 HOH. And this is when we first really start to get to know Kyland as we come to know him over the course of the season. As HOH, he's holding meetings and kind of sort of having an idea of what he wants to do. He was originally part of this sort of big grouping with Frenchie, the Slaughterhouse Alliance, but they've all collectively agreed to abandon that and send Frenchie out here, which he is going to do. He's going to nominate Frenchie with Brittany. Brittany, of course, being one of Frenchie's teammates on the Joker's team. And the week is fairly straightforward in that Frenchie is just going to be sent out. He's not even going to put up too much of a fight because, as sort of often happens with these players that are very chaotic as a first HOH, that they don't really have much left in them after they're not in power anymore. Like they've already burned all of their social capital in a single week, and now they have nothing. They have no cards in their hand.
He played 4 weeks of Big Brother in like his first HOH week, which was this one of the seasons where the first HOH was 2 weeks or just one?
I think we are now into the 1 week territory.
Okay, yeah. So he played so much that he had, like you said, nothing left to give. He's already offered all of these alliances. No one's going to believe anything he's saying at this point. So it's almost kind of like, okay, could he resort to just, hey, look, I'm not a threat because I'm rolling over and dying. Like there's nothing, like I can only be picked up at this point. I have no allegiances, but still at that point, everybody's trying to get actual allies. So there was like nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is really the rise of Tiffany this week. That in the first week, she was a little bit behind. She wasn't included in the initial big alliance. She ends up in a sort of a different big alliance, but by the time she's included in that one, these alliances are not really where you're supposed to be anyway. Using Kyland's HOH, she's able to really build up a good power structure, and that primarily is going to be made up of the Royal Flush Alliance, which is the merging of the kings, the queens, and I guess the aces.
I think it was there. They described it as the kings, the queens, and the ace in their pocket, who was Derek X.
Yes. That's exactly what it was. Ace in the pocket. And so this consists of like the kings and the queens. So it's Tiffany, Kyland, Claire, Sarah Beth, Alyssa, Christian, Xavier, and Derek X. Hannah's basically included in this as well, but not officially at first. There also was another sort of like brief alliance that I forgot to mention last week, which is the Butchers, which was the core of the slaughterhouse, which I thought was very funny. But it's the Royal Flush that's going to sort of be the main power structure for the next portion of this season. And this was an alliance built primarily by Tiffany through Kyland's HOH, and it was designed with the cookout in mind, and designed with Tiffany's own structure in mind. Her own structure being Hannah, Claire, and Derek X. So keeping them safe, building a structure and removing Frenchie the fisherman from the equation to have her own structure in the game was what she was going for. She has this very fun and cool speech to Claire and Derek from the week before about Frenchie the fisherman, and how they're going to sort of take over his whole situation, which is exactly what happens here. Of course, Kyland is also going to be playing very well this week, despite some people feeling like his HOH style was a bit rigid.
Yeah, this was during this HOH is when he like he would say like, "Oh, I don't, as the HOH, I don't have to give you information."
Yeah,
It's just a wild thing to say.
very Memphis of him to have a week 2 HOH that he just
Yes.
but there's some other stuff happening here. Derek wins his second veto competition in a row, which is kind of the kiss of death in Big Brother. The first 2 veto competitions going to Derek X. Nobody's ever going to forget that. Sarah Beth wins the wild card competition, which allows her to be like immune for a certain amount of time if she switches teams, or she has the ability to switch teams. She doesn't take it, so it doesn't matter. And she was never a target anyway. She and Kyland are going to become pretty close over the next few weeks. So it's most of these competitions are not super relevant.
Right.
So that's kind of it. That's Frenchie kind of leaves. And there's no more Frenchie. All of the chaos of week 1 the fires have been doused.
Yeah, and I think like in real time we felt that. We felt the absence of the chaos of Frenchie, because getting Frenchie out of there opens up the door for the cookout to really start like really forming in the sense of not beyond an understanding and become like more of a strategic play. And it's like, hey, this is now we're getting into the how are we just knocking out people step by step. Whereas Frenchie felt like the opposition. Frenchie was on his own agenda. We didn't know what to expect from him. But I remember that like the couple of weeks after that, it just didn't feel that exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a huge part of that is going to be Xavier winning the week 3 HOH and wanting to just do the classic thing, which is just build trust, take out a big consensus target. In this case, that target was in fact Brent Champagne.
Why is
Back
his
to where we
stance
started.
These poses
It's
are
funny.
hilarious.
I talk a lot about how it's like I gotta choose these very, very tiny thumbnails to decide which person to pick. And I see the stance and I instantly know who it is.
Yeah.
So the week does not go quite as smoothly as you'd hope. There's a lot of like extra drama around Brent and how his body perceives his intelligence and all of this stuff. Ultimately, though, it is just going to be Brent up on the block next to Brittany. Brittany at this point pretty upset because it's clear to her that she is becoming the like consensus pawn of the season, and that is not a great place to be.
Yeah. I mean, her perception was that like, I'm fighting for my life every week. Like, no, because that would be if you were being put up every week as the target. And so it, in a situation where like, okay, you're the infamous pawn, the main thing you need to be worried about is the day that people are okay with the pawn going home. But yeah, she was distraught by this. But yeah, I forgot about Brent and his he had that crush on Hannah. She's kind of weirded out by.
It's the whole thing, and he could like read lips, and
Oh yeah.
it's the whole
That he
thing.
said he told Alyssa that he saw that she mouthed that everybody that works with her wants to get with her or something like that. My goodness.
So the week just continues. Brent ends up leaving. Just it doesn't make too much of a strategic impact from there. And this team in general of the Aces, basically, Claire is gonna sort of pluck, or sorry, not Claire. Tiffany is gonna pluck Derek X from that team. Hannah, of course, being part of the cookout anyway, which meant that the Aces were kind of like the most expendable team left. They saw Whitney and Brent remaining, and they were like, let's just kind of remove the rest of them. The Jokers aren't really an issue for them because two of the members are Derek F and Azza. The other one is Brittany, who is their perpetual pawn. So the Royal Flush Alliance is just looking to remove the rest of their competition, and that means Brent and then, of course, Whitney the following week. And all of this just kind of continues on. Now, Whitney was a little bit trickier. The reason being, Christian goes on a bit of a comp run himself. Christian wins the veto on Xavier's HOH week, then wins the following HOH, and then wins the veto on his own HOH reign, which means that he has now won 3 competitions in a row. And on top of that, he's like backflipping around the house all over the place. And so it's Christian has kind of come out of nowhere. He's also now in an official showmance with Alyssa, and this is like a whole thing.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, do you credit Frenchie for this showmance? Because he was the one that saw it before they did. Well, before Alyssa did, at least. I'm sure Christian was attracted to her from the start.
They have a whole thing, especially on his eviction week, about like, are we gonna be like boyfriend and girlfriend? And it was like, oh, it's so so Christian is the HOH, and that is a little bit of a problem because they need him to do specific things. And there's a little bit of tension happening between Christian and Derek X now as the two kind of comp threats in the house, and being on separate teams, Christian being on the Kings. There's also now, with people starting to be worried about Christian and starting to think about like, we need to maybe target Christian the second we get the chance, is starting to cause some turmoil within the cookout themselves, because Xavier is kind of like, nah, Christian's my guy. He's on my team. I can control him. Don't worry about Christian. And everyone else is kind of like, don't we want to be doing stuff? Christian, on top of that, is looking at Hannah as a potential target, and they're having to do a lot of work to pull him off of that. He does end up nominating her next to their ultimate target, Whitney. So this was kind of a close call. And the first time that the cookout really needed to go to work to protect one of its members, and that work ended up being very successful, but it did cause some tension amongst the cookout members, again, because they are now at a bit of a conflict here in terms of interest and who they're working with.
Yeah, but they almost put themselves in a position to be okay, because I think, if I'm counting correctly, there were 10 votes that week.
Yes.
And they do have the numbers.
They had the numbers to force the issue with the votes. However, the worry was that it would expose them.
Gotcha.
So in an ideal world, they wanted to get the majority of people to agree to take out Whitney, and maybe not even have to have Hannah on the block at all if possible, so that they wouldn't be theoretically exposed. They were able to do enough social work to avoid that in the first place. But this was a week where we were starting to be like, because like Xavier was not really helping, at least at first. It really felt like dude, what are you doing? Why are you bringing up Hannah? Why are you letting this happen? Like, this is going to expose the whole thing. And he, while he does eventually come around, again, it is causing some frustration from him to the people who are like pushing him to like push Christian, and from them to be like, why are we having to push him to do this? Isn't this kind of the whole point?
Yeah. Whew, could you imagine That would have been a wild thing to happen so early. Because if they were like did have to put their feet to the fire and do the vote and it get exposed, and then like what does that look like? And just kind of you know, a lot of what ifs. But yeah, we definitely got to keep Hannah this week. No thanks to Xavier. And Whitney left without really making any indent in this episode, in this season. I think if you said you polled 100 Big Brother fans and you said name all house guests, most probably would forget to name Whitney.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she just kind of I think was in a rough spot in terms of her team.
Yes.
It was a bit brutal there. She did have a couple of connections, but ultimately was just in a position here where she was such an easy consensus target, and which is part of why Christian didn't want to do it. She's too easy of a target. But in a season where there's a solid structure, easy targets are great for them. And so it didn't work out for her. Now, once again, things are going to get a little bit sticky. And this is where things really start to come to a crossroads, because the next HOH is going to be Derek X. And this is an HOH, I believe, where Xavier sort of negotiates for safety, and is hoping that safety kind of extends to Christian and Alyssa to some degree. But in the eyes of Derek X, it kind of doesn't. And certainly in the eyes of kind of like the rest of the cookout, it certainly also doesn't. And so this is kind of the make or break point for the cookout in terms of their relationships. There's also a make or break point with Tiffany, who is going to have to make a decision in these weeks about like where is the line,
Right.
because there's a world where Tiffany can win this game by going to the end with Hannah, with Derek, with Claire, cutting Derek at a certain point, bringing Kylan to a certain point. It primarily just doesn't involve Xavier.
Right.
And, the question then is like, there are people, even this early on, when Derek wins this HOH, who are like looking at Xavier. And Christian's a bigger target, but like Xavier's a perfectly fine person to put on the block next to Christian if you're going to go back on the deal kind of in the first place. And throughout the next few weeks, Claire and Derek X and a few other people are going to be talking about Xavier, talking about like, well, we should be pulling the trigger on Xavier, and that is a more winning route for Tiffany. I think she knows this. That especially in the world that we've been talking about the last few weeks, where the competitions have become increasingly more and more physical and athletic. A player like Tiffany, who is very fit, but not, Xavier Kylan fit, is going to have a tough time beating those people out in the end game. And so getting to an end game with people like Azah and Hannah and Claire and Alyssa instead of Xavier and Kylan, and there's basically a way that she controls not only who is in the end game with her that gives her a better chance of like both winning end game competitions and also being taken to the end, but also like controlling the boot order toward the end of the season. Within the cookout, she has some amount of influence, but those are not necessarily the people that she would naturally want to work with the most or best, that she gets along with the most strategically. She clashes with Azah a lot because they have very different philosophies on how to play the game. She clashes with Big D a lot for tons of reasons. And her and Xavier are like, they both recognize that they're each other's threats, and that at some point one of the other one will need to go. And so they have this uneasy sort of truce. And then her and Kylan have a whole thing going on. And we'll eventually have to talk a lot about that. But like, these are not the people that she can control the end game with.
Right.
So she has to make a decision. Does she go with the structure that she has on her own and use the cookout to help her, bolster that up and get there? Or does she go in the opposite direction? Does she sort of sacrifice the positioning she has with the structure and the people that she's playing with over here in order to make sure that the cookout succeeds? And she's torn. She's torn about this. She's torn up. She stays up all night. Eventually sleeps because it comes to her in a dream that she wants to do the master plan, which is, of course, essentially the brigade style of alliance, where you're going to have each person having their own like side alliance, parachute alliance, and make sure that if you ever go up on the block, you go up with that person. Then they have the votes to save you over that person. Only this time, it's with 6 people and not 4, and there is a common cause gluing them together and preventing them from Matt Hoffmaning anyone.
Right. Yeah, this was a big decision because, even if, let's say, Tiffany didn't go the cookout route, if she went with the people that she had the most influence on and tried to move forward with them in the game, had successfully gotten out Xavier at some point, then if let's say she makes it to the end and doesn't win, then she kind of
Right.
has to deal with like, dang, I was the reason that we didn't. We could have, like, what would have happened if we could have made the cookout happen and could have made it to the end, and then it doesn't happen. So it's just kind of like there still was this world that she could, even that wasn't just like a clear path to winning. There still
Yeah, it
was,
was.
like, you're still keeping in a comp beast and Derek X. You're still keeping in people that have relationships with each other. Like, there were moments that Hannah said she had a crush on Derek X and he was really friendly with her, but he still had a great relationship with Claire in the house. And so it was kind of like there was a chance that they could even recognize, if they, let's say they had made to Final Four, that, oh, we need to get Tiffany out because everyone respects her game. She could win.
Yeah, basically, I think the way that you'd sort of look at it math-wise is like, if she kept the structure she had, she'd probably have like a plus 20 to 30% chance of winning the game, maybe more. But it still wouldn't be 100. It would be like,
Right.
let's say if her chances of winning the game with the cookout were like 20% at best, then she'd have like a 50, 60% chance of winning if she stuck to her structure, given how we know things played out.
Yeah.
But if she stuck with the cookout, she'd have a lower chance of winning herself. However, it all but guarantees that the cookout succeeds.
Yes.
It's like this is a for sure path
Yeah.
for the cookout and the mission that they have to crown the first Black winner of the show. And then here's a chance, and it's a better chance for me, but it's still just a chance. And so, these things are playing around in her mind. Xavier is having a similar kind of dilemma at this time, where he's struggling with losing Christian potentially, and at some point having to lose Alyssa, who he kind of had his own crush on, at least at first, and so he's kind of struggling with this dilemma as well. Like, what does he want to do with the game? And so Tiffany ends up approaching them all with the master plan. And, the master plan was in many ways sort of a solidification of the general idea that they already had. But the importance of it was with a like set in stone on paper strategy now. They were all now committing to this plan in a way that they hadn't really done before.
Yeah.
And with this commitment, things are much more set in stone in terms of where this alliance is going to go. So over the next few weeks, as these things are rising up with more tension about like Christian being HOH and then Derek X being HOH, and who is Christian targeting? Where is Derek X going to shoot? Are they going to take out Christian? All of these things. Despite the tension that's happening, the cookout is still adhering to the plan, and I think it's worth examining why the cookout is not only as successful as they are, but why they are so glued together. And the obvious is that they had this mission that they wanted to accomplish. But I think another thing that aided that is the thing that aids a lot of big alliances, which is that this is just such a good strategy. like,
Yeah.
like this is just such a vehicle to the final six, and or at least close to it. At which point you could always decide to make your move. But by then, the mission was far more valuable and important than that. And so I think it was the combination of those two things that really propelled this alliance in a way that none other has. And like these players were just so by far the most successful alliance builders and sort of wielders in the history of the show. And that is the what's fascinating about the season, because and the reason I'm talking so much about this is because many of these weeks will
Yeah.
this is all context for why all of these weeks are fairly simple.
Exactly. It's like it's so straightforward week after week, which it's interesting to think about, like what you said. It's not only did they have this great mission, but to just be protected by 11 people. Everyone had a +1 except for Big D. And then you're like, okay, I don't have to worry about any of these +1s because the cookout got me. So it's like, oh, if I have to look at 10 other people up until like getting rid of, because have we reached the jury yet?
Not quite. Brittany's going to be the first member of the jury. That's going to be Kylan's
Okay.
HOH
Okay.
next
So
week.
like at this point, yeah, we're 1 week away from the jury starting, and then knowing that, okay, we all have this goal. The only risk at this point is anyone prioritizing their +1 over us. But if you do that, now you have 5 people looking at you because you just messed that up. So it's just kind of like it's not quite the Vanessa thing of trying to play for other people and thinking like what's in their best interest. But because they all have this same, like, and they keep reiterating it, like in the individual things or in individual conversations of just like what the purpose of doing the cookout is, it like ensures success.
Mm-hmm. So with Derek X at the helm, they pull the trigger on Christian. Derek is going to nominate Brittany and Sarah Beth initially. Brittany pulls out her impressive veto win this week, which she is very proud of, but will in some ways come back to bite her. A pawn is only as valuable as their ability to be a pawn, and if they start winning competitions, then they become a threat, which can be good because it can get you out of being a pawn, but then can also be bad in that if you're not a pawn and you're on the block, you might become the target.
Right.
And that is exactly what's going to happen the following week. However, in the meantime, Derek X is going to again take this shot at Christian, much to Xavier's dismay. Now, there's a lot of extra complicated stuff going on this week, primarily around should they actually flip this vote and save Christian. And Tiffany is really considering that and pushing that, in part because Christian actually did have some value to Tiffany's game right now, given the path that she's moving. He's part of the Royal Flush still, and she could continue to sort of play off of where he was. And then the other part is that she really does not like not Claire, but Sarah Beth. She really doesn't like Sarah Beth, and Sarah Beth was on the block next to Christian, and so this was a great opportunity to take out Sarah Beth.
Yeah. Before we had, FBJ, we had FSB. How did she say it? I can't even remember.
I couldn't. Yeah, Bowie Jane really really
Really
messed up
took
my
over.
memory of what it was for Sarah Beth.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tiffany starts kind of coming up with conspiracy theories about like things she saw and like planes about Sarah Beth, and it was FSB AISTS.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so there's a lot of stuff happening here. It's actually, Big D, probably in his most sort of active week of the game, is really going to kind of try to stop this flip from happening. And ultimately, it does not go through. And so Christian ends up evicted here right before the jury. And that means that he's not going to be able to hang out with Alyssa in the jury. And so he has to ask her what's going to happen when they both get out, and does not get a definitive answer.
Yeah, and he tells Julie that's his girly girl.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Not too many can be, Swaggy and Bailey.
Yeah. So the following week, Kyland wins the HOH, and he's actually looking at not Brittany, but Claire. Here, he's looking at Claire as a potential target, and that's because information has been getting back to him. Some of that information from Tiffany herself, although not meaning to place a target on Claire. That Claire is looking at people like Xavier and him, and that is bad news. That he doesn't want that to happen. Yes, there was some drama also, as being pointed out in the chat, with Azza this week. That Azza really wanted to win this HOH, and Kyland wins it instead. And so they have a whole argument about that. But eventually, Tiffany is actually going to kind of talk Kyland down with the help of Claire herself. She's going to get Kyland to not target Claire anymore, and instead be looking at Brittany, who had just won her first competition the previous week, and was also somebody that they could start to pin some things on, in terms of like what she's been saying and her proximity to some of the other players.
Yeah, I feel like watching it in real time, one of the things that the most exciting thing about this season is the cookout. The least exciting thing is everything else, because there were just such limited options. There was just a handful of people who could potentially go home. And so it's just kind of like, all right, yeah, even at this point, okay, if we're thinking Claire or Brittany or Alyssa, Sarah Beth, we shouldn't be able to name on one hand the options the two of who should go home. But that because the cookout was so solid, that's what it became.
Yeah. So there's the high roller room happens this week as well. There's going to be some shenanigans going on with the veto, where basically Kyland gets the opportunity to place a bet on who's going to win the veto. He ends up betting correctly that Alyssa is going to win the veto. Alyssa does so he gets a veto as well. He uses his veto to remove Claire from the block, leaving Brittany up against Big D, and that is when they vote out Brittany.
Yep. Who, could she have been? I think one thing, the reason I'm just going to keep bringing this up because that's the story of the season. The reason the cookout worked so well was there was no risk of Brittany leading a charge to get together Sarah Beth and Derek X, and they had to know that the cookout was a thing in order to build up something to stop them. And so it just felt like Brittany trusted in the Jokers, and that was it.
Yeah. She also got a big amount of money from the audience. There was this whole voting thing where you give away a certain amount of money for the most voted person, and then the second most voted person gets a certain amount of money. In classic Big Brother twist style, every time they voted for somebody the most, they just screwed that person over and got them voted out, which was partly the case here with Brittany. So then the following week, we see this is the origin of F Sarah Beth. Sarah Beth wins the next HOH. And for me, this was F whispering because
Yes.
Sarah Beth essentially was looking to make big moves this week. She was looking at, she was looking at Xavier. She was looking at like just doing something valuable to her game that would do good for her game.
Yes.
And Kylan spent an entire night in the HOH bed with her, just whispering sweet nothings into her ear. And by sweet nothings, I mean lots and lots and lots of whispering in circles over and over and over. And by the morning, like many before her, but most recently, Danny and Cody, she wakes up the next morning just completely spellbound and ready to do Kylan's bidding. And in this case, Kylan's bidding is going to be Derek X.
Yeah. Unfortunately. It looks like he's about to walk somewhere.
It does.
He's like taking off to go
This
to
is
his
a
right.
very strange photo, which unfortunately for Derek, I guess he is not a stranger to.
Yeah.
So again, the week is a little bit wacky here in terms of like what happens. The wild card competition the high roller room competition ends with Alyssa winning, and she then like spins a wheel, which ends up replacing Big D on the block with Xavier, which is quite a wild result there. And again, huge sort of push from many of the players who are not in the cookout, which are not many players left, to use this opportunity to potentially take Xavier out. This week, they don't have the ability to because he goes on to win the veto anyway. And then, of course, they replace him, or Sarah Beth replaces him with Derek X. Derek X not even being chosen to play in the veto and didn't use any of his money that week to play in the high roller room either, after being convinced by both Tiffany and Hannah that he didn't need to.
Yeah. And it's so unfortunate because I feel like Derek X was really getting, starting to learn Big Brother. I think he realized his strength was in the social element, and I feel like he learned a lot from Tiffany and from Hannah. And it seemed like if he were to play this game again, we would see a completely different Derek X because he's like he knows what he's doing now. He's not just like figuring out his route as he's running. Um, and so he is a threat because he is a competition beast. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, basically, him and Claire had tried to flip the vote on Big D the previous week. They'd been pushing for Xavier to go that week. They'd been pushing for Xavier to go this week. And unfortunately for them, their closest allies were Tiffany and Hannah, who were not reporting everything back, but reporting enough back to keep people aware of their threat level and basically just turning them down at every step. And so there's, at this point, not much they can say to defend Derek X. It is, theoretically the right call for him to leave here if you are gunning for a cookout final six. But of course, if you are Hannah and Tiffany, this is definitely not the place you want to lose Derek X for your own longevity in the game. But again,
Right.
the decision had been made. And so, against their own interests, they are sort of tricking Derek into allowing himself to be evicted this week.
Yeah, because even though the main objective is final six, the cookout, you still want your person to be one of the last people. You never know like what's going to happen. There may be something that happens that they don't control that, oh, you get to final seven, that person wins HOH. Okay, I want to make sure I'm good with that person and that be my person. And so now you're just fighting for your people to be the last one standing. So it's kind of like, even though they have understood this plan now for a couple of weeks, it's like, they can kind of get used to the idea of having to say goodbye, but they don't want that to be that person sooner than other people's people.
Mm-hmm. So that's it for Derek X. A lot of people spent the previous few weeks like scouring the conversations he was having with Claire about like, does he know? Does he know and he's not saying it? I think they know. They didn't know. They
Yeah.
didn't know. They never knew. And so that's going to be it for Derek. He did bond quite a bit with Claire. Some people were surprised at their eventual romance, but in the jury house. But obviously they were quite close by the end of both of their times in the house. In fact, Claire is going to be like sobbing about him leaving that week. So that is Derek X, of course, goes on to win the Amazing Race with Claire. So happy ending for the two of them, or at least ending for now.
Yeah. Claire was crying, Hannah was crying, Tiffany's crying. I was like, this is like Jesse when Jesse got evicted.
And then yes, it's this is it's his ironically not about Claire, but this is the exit interview where we got hopefully this plays.
Ooh. Oh, I love it.
Oh my goodness.
So Tiffany wins the following HOH. And of course, Tiffany's target is Sarah Beth. She has wanted Sarah Beth gone for so long now. Kyland won and he wouldn't target Sarah Beth. Then Sarah Beth won. And now finally, Tiffany can take out Sarah Beth. And so all she needs to do is nominate Sarah Beth. Up next to Kyland, he's perfectly willing to go on the block that week, so he doesn't have to be, like that's a perfect cover for him, and he's willing to do that. So Kyland and Sarah Beth on the block. Little caveat here as well, Xavier also on the block this week due to a penalty or punishment or thing, whatever, from the previous veto competition. Xavier is also going to be on the block this week from Tiffany's HOH. Then, to make things even more complicated, the high roller room saw Claire win the competition and have the ability to usurp Tiffany's HOH reign and have an HOH reign of her own. And of course, this is like the last big opportunity for Claire to kind of do anything. In particular, again, she really wanted to take down Xavier, but that was not going to eventually happen. She wanted Xavier to go, but ultimately it was happy to keep the nominations the same and ultimately like follow along with Tiffany's initial plans for the week.
Do you remember Claire's in-game plans at this point? Now with Derek X gone, like was she just thinking Tiffany, Hannah?
I believe in Claire's mind, it was like, which is why like she kept being like, why are we keeping Kyland and Xavier in this house?
Yeah.
But they did make an alliance called the Detectives, which was with Kyland, Claire, Derek, Kyland, and Tiffany. So it was primarily Xavier that she was looking at as like, we should be getting out Xavier. But in her mind, I think it was like, well, Tiffany had sort of said like, Sarah Beth is the problem. With Sarah Beth gone, we have Kyland. Then at this point, I think they felt like they had Hannah enough, and it was just a matter of like, we need to just beat out the other side. And if you're ever like thinking that, then it's probably bad news.
Yeah.
But I would say at this point, for as much as the Delusional Claire Club or whatever they called themselves
Right.
would have loved to have felt differently, I think that she had kind of been beaten into submission by the game. That like nothing she wanted to do was happening. She had been pushing over and over and over for her alliance to make a move, and her alliance kept saying no.
Yeah.
Tiffany kept saying no. Hannah kept saying no. On this HOH, Hannah uses the veto on Xavier, and they don't even have the option to make that move anymore. And it's just like, what do you do at that point? Now, maybe you say you jump ship and you do your own thing and you use this
Right.
usurping power to force the issue. And unfortunately for Claire, that's not what she did. But I also don't think it's fair to say that she did nothing all season. She was trying very hard to do things all season. But when your alliance members don't support you, there's not a
your
lot
hands are
that you can
tied.
do solo. Exactly. If she had won an HOH on her own, I think she would have been much more inclined to make the move. But I think she just didn't feel comfortable stealing her closest allies HOH and using the power to do something that she knew Tiffany didn't want her to do. She knew also how desperate Tiffany was to get Sarah Beth out after weeks and weeks and weeks of being like so upset that they couldn't. So for Claire to steal Tiffany's HOH and then use it for her own purposes, I think would have felt like a big betrayal. Of course, what happens the following week might also feel like a bit of a betrayal. But in Claire's mind, there was just no reason to really do that because I don't think that she understood how dire her circumstances were.
Yeah, that had to be so confusing from her perspective and just like how she saw the game. Like you said, Hannah and Tiffany being against trying to get Xavier and Kylan out. Like that can't make how does that make sense when you feel like you have a good read on the layout of the house? So that's so interesting. But you're not gonna assume, well, maybe there's a cookout.
Tiffany did really great work with them in regards to Xavier because they were on Xavier so much. And Tiffany was able to redirect them every time, and they never got suspicious of Tiffany and Xavier, like working together. They never saw that Tiffany was vouching for him, was defending him. She was able to like redirect so subtly and effectively that they just never saw it coming. And I mean, part of that was like, I think the reality of it, like,
Yeah.
Tiffany's so smart. It would never make sense for her to secretly be working with Xavier.
Right.
So why would we even consider that possibility? But part of it also, of course, was Tiffany's own ability.
Yeah, I think like back on our earlier point and just like the decision point that Tiffany ultimately had to come to, which path she wanted to take. I feel like of the 6, she had the most to lose from taking that path from her in like a selfish way, in I could potentially win on my own, where she knows the cookout is like has 2 of the comp bees that have been taking over this game. And it's, I think Xavier had everything to gain from taking the cookout because he's looking around and thinking, oh, I feel like I can beat most of them in competitions. And I feel like I'm in a good position with them in terms of they respect me. And I think that they may want each other out. And so I'm thinking in terms of the 6, like who lost the most, who didn't. And so it's tough to think about that with Tiffany, that she did sacrifice the most in order for us to get our first Black winner.
And so even though this was not the optimal path for Tiffany, she was trying to put in work to make it happen anyway, to make it happen that she might be able to win. Primarily, she's been working very closely with Kylan for such a long time, and she really starts to lock in with him for the end game. She's also starting to pull in this kind of like temporary truce of a women's alliance amongst the cookout with Azah and Hannah, trying to keep that in check. Hannah has had a good relationship with Xavier for a long time, but Tiffany, especially toward the end of the game, is going to be able to really pull Hannah away from Xavier and lock her in, and get into a place where she was hoping at worst it was 3v3, and at best Azah was like, gonna go after Kylan before she went after Tiffany or Hannah. So Kylan was her shield in front of her, also her weapon to strike at Xavier and Big D. And even in that 3v3, it was really, theoretically, comp-wise, like they were the stronger team with Kylan and her versus Xavier and Azah and Big D. And so it actually wasn't looking bad. Like she had managed to pull some things out of the fire and like was really kind of working that metal. However, after Sarah Beth's eviction, she kind of faces a bit of a setback, and it is one of her own doing because she wins the next HOH, and she was not supposed to.
Yeah. Which is what yeah. I think that like even when we think on seasons like this and I can't remember which other recent season was like they were just manufacturing who won HOH. It's like it's just taking it's so funny that they have such a such a hold on the game that they can be like, okay, this person's gonna win, and then the next, what was that? Big Brother 19. These are, I mean, two very completely different seasons, but when we think about like, okay, HOH, I'm glad Tiffany took this in her hands and just won it because it's just like, when people just want to think they have so much control that they can like choose the next winner, is just like, come on, let's actually just compete and then adjust from there. But like you said, because of who's left, it made it difficult for her with who they wanted to get out.
The problem is, at this point, the only two people that aren't in the cookout that are left in the game are Claire and Alyssa. And for Tiffany to be the one to take out Claire makes no sense. So, and Claire was the person that they were looking to take out next. She just usurped an HOH and they barely dodged a bullet. Claire is more capable in competitions, clearly, than Alyssa at this point. That's what they're thinking, at least. And also, like, for what it's worth, Xavier's pushing super hard to have Alyssa be the final person left. So they're both kind of having this little bit of proxy war. And I think that at least in my mind, and I've talked to Tiffany, so this is I would say more so my own sort of interpretation rather than what she said. But like in my mind, I think that there was just a little bit of an itch to win something, not the competition necessarily, but to sort of prove to herself and to sort of like the world, right, that like,
yeah,
I was the one. Like I'm doing something myself here. The one thing she had control over was who was the last person to be evicted from outside of the cookout, right? Like that was the one thing that she could be like, she's had to sacrifice so much. She's had to sort of choose this path, and everyone has too, for the record. I don't want to say that Tiffany's the only person that sacrificed, even though it did benefit others more than it benefited her. I think every one of those players felt like they were sacrificing something. Xavier, even though he wins, still sacrificed the ability to have played the game on his own terms without having to compromise in different ways. Xavier, after the season, talked about like, it would have been great if he had felt like he was capable of playing the way that he sort of intended when he went into the game, and sort of like prove himself in other ways. And instead, he played, I think, a more subdued game in his mind because he felt like that was what was required of me based on the Cookout Alliance, based on what we had structured. And so, I think all of. Go ahead.
It's so interesting because he wouldn't have won had it not been for the cookout. Because there were, in my opinion, I feel like there were so many situations where Tiffany bailed him out or Kyland, came through, and because of the cookout, he's not going after Xavier. But any other world, Xavier is going to be targeted.
I think that is very true. What I will say in defense of Xavier to that is that if the cookout doesn't exist, maybe he's playing in a completely different way, and maybe those situations don't exist, right? Like, maybe Derek and Claire aren't even there to be looking at him if he has the ability to point Christian at Derek and Claire when Christian is the HOH instead of, like there's not that he necessarily could have at that time, but like I think the cookout was so fundamental to how the strategy of the season was structured that it's hard to say with definitive, I think, logic, like how anybody would have done. I think the closest we can is Tiffany because she had the most solid structure outside of the cookout. But I think that like I said, I think you're right, but I think that ultimately it's impossible to say like who is the Xavier that we see sans cookout. We don't even necessarily know. I guess we've seen him on like the challenge, but I don't remember how well he did.
And he was on Reindeer Games.
Oh yeah, he was on reindeer games too.
Yeah.
He made
And
it far.
Brittany was like, what's he doing here? And they were like, oh, he won. She said he won.
Oh, I remember that. Oh boy. Anyway, in my mind, this was Tiffany's way of like getting one win in, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
going to protect Claire until Final 7. That's the one thing I can do. And unfortunately for her, it did not work out that way because after nominating Alyssa and Xavier, Alyssa won the veto. The worst person who could have done it. There was all kinds of like, was Xavier going to try in the veto? Is he going to throw it to Alyssa? All of this stuff going on. And with Alyssa having won the veto, she now has to be the one to evict Claire or betray the cookout. And of course, it's not a choice. It's going to be Claire, and they have a very emotional conversation about it where Tiffany alludes to the reasons why without giving specifics. And Claire, I think, very graciously understands, and in the moment that her dreams as a super fan are being crushed, she is also able to recognize and sort of empathize with the reasons why, and is ultimately going to be sent to the jury, where she falls in love and wins $1 million. So it's fine.
She is A-okay. And also, this was on day 59. So we can't forget that only was like day 52, day 53 was the first time the cookout actually met in person all together for the first time. And they're like, wow, this hasn't happened. They put their hands together. They said the cookout, and then they quickly dispersed. But it was just wild that an alliance was able to exist in the shadows for that long with 6 people.
Mm-hmm. So Claire leaves, and Hannah wins the next HOH, which was also the worst case scenario for the Final 7 HOH, that Hannah wins this. Because she then can't compete in the Final 6 HOH. Hannah is going to be able to send Alyssa home immediately following Claire in that double eviction. And just like that, the cookout has officially made it to the Final 6. There's a little bit of trickery going on this week with Alyssa and Xavier on the block, where like they pretend like Xavier's the target, and then when Xavier takes himself off the block, it's like, oh well, Kylan's going to be the target, but then they actually all just vote out Alyssa except for Xavier, and so there's stuff going on there, but that is it. We were a small fact from the season in the trenches. We were very concerned because there was like a 2-hour episode planned. And just the previous season, of course, we had the triple eviction where where we lost all of the like Danny Donato fallout from happening, where like she just gets evicted with little fanfare, and we didn't get to see them betray her, which was the thing we'd been looking forward to for like a long time. And we were very concerned for a while that like, are they going to do another triple eviction from like 8 to 5? Are we going to like miss the moment?
Right.
And maybe that was the plan. Maybe they changed the plan. Who knows? But they ended up with going with a double eviction. So we were safely able to go into the Final 6 as is.
Yeah. I thought it was funny, and they also mentioned it in the chat that I think it was when Claire was on the block that Alyssa was like, I just noticed, I look around, am I next? And it's funny because even then she was joking, but it's like it was, she was next. So I thought that was I remember watching that on the feeds, and that was just so funny.
So that brings us to the Final 6, the cookout. Now, unfortunately for Tiffany, what we talked about before, the end game that she had been trying to set up, had been countered by Xavier's end game. Xavier, who all season had been sort of, we talked in season 20 about like Tyler and Brett and how Tyler spent the first half of the game focusing on the rest of the house outside of level 6, and then spent the second half of the game focusing inside of the alliance within level 6, and Brett kind of changed roles and started talking to the other people outside of it. That was kind of always the case with Xavier and Tiffany. Xavier always kind of focused more on his people within the cookout, and Tiffany spent more time outside of the cookout talking with other people like Claire and Derek. And so Xavier had been able to really lock in Big D and Azah. And for a while, it seemed like he might have had Hannah to some degree as well. They had a close relationship. Tiffany was able to pull Hannah away. Tiffany was able to like seemingly lock in Kyland. And then, as we said, started to kind of pull Azah enough that hopefully Azah would at least target Kyland over her or Hannah. However, specifically on the HOH that Tiffany was not supposed to win, this gave Xavier a lot of ammunition to use in retaliation against Tiffany's cookout structure. And he's able to work up a lot of like righteous anger at Tiffany and her selfish style of play, which, pulls right into the way that sort of like Azah has been arguing with Tiffany about, again, their philosophy in the game all season long. So Azah is like fully seemingly pulled back in with Xavier, and Big D has always felt like him and Xavier are like number 1 and 2 in the game. So that's not changing. But then the crucial thing here, the thing that changes the entire outcome of the season, is that somewhere along the line, around the week that Tiffany wins that HOH, number 1, Kylan and Tiffany like hook up.
Yeah. No.
Number 2, Kylan seemingly like stops respecting Tiffany.
Just out of nowhere.
Decides that he would rather go with the end with a guy he respects more, and that is Xavier.
And that was a choice on his end. That's why he got what was coming, which like that had to eat him up. Like there's no way he doesn't think or like after that, because obviously he's had a challenge career since then. But after that, think about, dang, what if I had, decided not to put up Tiffany and decide to stick with Tiffany and go after X first before he could get me.
Mm-hmm. And so, again, like, I think that there's a lot of like potential explanations. I think one of them is that he maybe always planned to do this and it just didn't come out until later. I think that you could say that Tiffany winning that HOH and giving a lot of time for Xavier and Kylan to bond over Tiffany's misplay of winning that HOH was probably a huge factor there. And then, just in general, the structure of how these seasons are built. Xavier has more reason to feel respectable because he's a big, strong guy, and competitions favor big, strong guys, and therefore big, strong guys are more valuable and respectable in the game. That is how it has been structured, which is exactly why, by the way, the people who are upset about a thing like the cookout happening don't really seem to have any credibility in my eyes, because, they fail to recognize that the game is never fair.
Yeah.
And there are always choices being made, most of them by production themselves. And the choices are, what kinds of competitions are there? The kinds of competitions you decide to have on your show ultimately impact who is valued on your show the most. And so you can't just ignore that fact and pretend it's all a vacuum, and that some people are just naturally better at competitions or better at the show in general because they are good at the competitions that the producers have chosen to include in this season. And then, of course, the even bigger one, who is on the cast? That is also a choice. And so, by casting, even if you go beyond race, you could just say kinds of people. You could say all of these kinds of people and then one of this kind of person. How is that person going to do? It's all a choice. None of it's fair. And when the players take their fate into their own hands and sort of defy the forces that have put them down, that is not oppression. That is not reverse racism or anything like that. Right? Like that is them doing exactly what I said, which is taking sort of their fate into their own hands in defiance of a structure that was designed for them to fail. And so all of this to say, Xavier in this world fits the mold a lot better than Tiffany does. He is much more capable of, winning physical competitions. He is, a big, strong guy. And I think to his credit was very good at using that and pulling on the strings that he needed to with Kyland to make that work. They form like the Gentleman's Agreement Alliance or something along those lines. And so
and pulling on the strings with Azza, who admitted that she had a crush on him, and just like kind of, okay, I'm gonna use that to my advantage. But that's what would just like killed me about the end game here was it was just this huge buildup. Like, will they do it? Oh my gosh, can they actually do it? Is it happening? Like, oh my gosh, getting excited. We get to the final 6, then okay, Tiffany goes.
Instantly.
What? Are you serious? Like the main character, like if I had to call out like the people that had who were the biggest reasons for the cookout making it to final 6 would be Tiffany and Kyland. And so even getting to the final 6, it's just like, it just goes to show you that even when you are able to, and even when you are able to, reach this goal, sexism still exists. And I'm not saying that's the whole reason that she went out 6, but that definitely played into the dynamics. Because like we said, like what was the reason for the instant loss of respect?
Right. Like when the reasoning is not strategic and instead sort of based on value or perceived value or respect, that's when you really start to go like, well, where did that come from?
Exactly. And the fact that we saw this like on the feeds, or we get to see Kyland's endless dialogue about why this is happening and saying like, oh, Tiffany brought this on herself because she did this or she did that. And then it's like, okay, now flip it and talk about all the things Xavier did for himself, and of course he won't do that. And so it's just, it reminds you of, the dynamics we see in a lot of other seasons of Big Brother that are just continuing to be there because that's just like, it's obviously a microcosm of society. And we got to see it here with the final 6. And it's just like this ego that Xavier and Big D got at the end, like not even when we get to the final 2, but in this final 6 dynamic, it's just like, how dare Tiffany do things for her own interest? How dare she prioritize her own game? And it's just like, can y'all take a step back and hush and realize like y'all all came here without knowing each other in the first place. Like this is something y'all all agreed to. So you can't just try to start knocking people for their gameplay. Why? Why are you doing it when you have 2 clear comp beasts right here with Tiffany or with Kyland and Xavier? It was just like, oh, it was just the biggest decline that week because it was just like, it was just a huge reminder of just the natural dynamics that are always there.
Yeah, and it's sort of like to sort of increase the contrast here as well. Kyland's just being played, just so openly and casually and easily being played. Xavier has no qualms about cutting Kyland. He does not care about the gentleman's agreement. And Kyland is going to be extremely offended about this. But Xavier is just actually playing the game and successfully so. And so on Kyland's HOH, they are going to evict Tiffany, and then in another double eviction, which kind of adds to the theory that maybe there wasn't originally a triple planned, they are going to send Hannah out right after her on a surprise Azza HOH win, which was part of the frustration with Azah, which was like, kind of all of a sudden, and this is kind of the story, at least from the perspective at the time, of like Azah's endgame, where all of a sudden kind of like it opened up and she had a great chance to win. She had a couple of potential opportunities. This is the one solid, concrete opportunity that she had. Now, having talked to Azah myself, I think, again, the thing about trying to examine the decisions made, especially in the end game, but even throughout the season, is kind of tricky because it wasn't all strategic. And there were other motivations. And I think for Azah, I don't want to speak for her, but I think a lot of it came down also to like, not only do like, now that we have accomplished this thing, I want to make sure, I mean, again, it kind of came down to like respectability, but like, I want to make sure that the person who wins is the person that I like the best, that I think represents us the best. And in her mind, I think that was Xavier. And so the idea of her cutting Xavier here, given that Kyland wins the veto, kind of opens up the door for somebody like Kyland to win instead. And I'm not sure that she wanted that.
And
I think
Kyland
that,
saves Xavier here, right?
well, yeah, yes, because she didn't nominate Kyland. But like in a world where she was, what I'm saying is, in a world where she nominates Kyland and Xavier, like she should have strategically,
Right.
Kyland wins that veto, would have been safe anyway. But ends up saving Xavier. But that was always kind of like the plan in her mind. I think she was always willing to take out Hannah here, but I think could have been persuaded to take out Kyland as well, if given an actual opportunity. But honestly, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations to be had about the end game. And I'd highly recommend just like hearing what Azah has to say about it, because I find her to be very compelling and interesting in how she talks about these decisions. So I'd recommend listening to her. But ultimately, this is kind of like the last gasp, that Azah wins this double eviction HOH, and maybe something will happen, but it doesn't. She takes out Hannah. And at this point, we all kind of know it's over.
Yeah.
Xavier has won the game.
I think I still was in the camp that Kim Kyland pull it out.
Well, the thing was that Kyland was so dead set on bringing Xavier to the final two.
Yeah.
And he was 1000% losing to Xavier in the final two. So like in my mind, it was, well, either Xavier or Kyland is going to win final three HOH, very likely. And Kyland is bringing Xavier, and Xavier is bringing whoever he wants, because it doesn't matter, because he's going to beat anybody. In the event that Big D or Azah wins, theoretically, they are also currently planning to take Xavier. So like, in my mind, the game had ended.
Yeah. And it isn't too surprising that Hannah went out on Azah's HOH, because there was this like weird storyline throughout the whole season where Azah just had this thing against Hannah. Like, it was always like we would randomly hear these conversations on the feed where it was like Azah perceived the cookout as the cookout. Oh, and then, Hannah is also in it. They just, it always felt like Tiffany was the connective tissue between them in their relationship.
Yeah, I think, to my memory, I think that I believe, again, I don't want to speak for Azah. I believe Azah feels like that was something that was sort of exaggerated in the edit, more so than actually existed. And I don't think anybody else contradicts that. But certainly, I think that, we already knew this, that like Tiffany and Hannah were kind of their own separate thing from the other, from like Azah, Big D, and Xavier. And again, I think something that's very fascinating about those relationships is that, as I mentioned, they just, like, Hannah ascribed to Tiffany's sort of philosophy on the game, and Azah had kind of a different one. And so I think that that just didn't quite mesh either. So that is it for Hannah Chada. Wonderful person, but is eliminated here, evicted at the final 5, which brings us, of course, to the final 4, where Xavier beats Kyland in both the HOH and the veto competition. And that means that the door is open, that Aza and Kyland are left on the block. Xavier leaves Big D off the block with instructions to evict Kyland. And actually, weirdly, Big D doesn't want to do it. He wants to evict Aza.
Which is wild, given their, like, they've been in it with each other since the Joker days. But it just became Aza, Big D, even Kylan playing Xavier's game. And so even in this situation, it's like, okay, Xavier's like, I want you to do this, when it's like, it's not something he wants to do. He's still going to do it.
Again, what I will say is, and another thing I'll say, which I think is important, that we talk about like respectability, and that just kind of became the way to talk about strategy in this end game. It was a lot of talk about like who deserves it, who like carried who. And, you know, Big D was talking a lot about like, well, I carried Aza through the game in my backpack. And, you know, Xavier was talking about how like, you know, he carried the cookout to this point. And Kyland was talking about how he carried the cookout to this point. And well, I think that there's obviously a lot to examine within that. I think another important thing to mention is that like these things are often sort of just a language that starts being used as strategy.
Yeah.
Not always intentionally so, but like every house, every like mini society creates its own version of like, this is bad, this is good, and we do the good things and we support the good people, and we don't do the bad things and we eliminate the bad people. And usually you just kind of create a sort of a language or a structure, that a moral structure that supports what you deem to be good for you strategically. And I think a lot of players often get lost in that sauce and like believe in their own nonsense.
Yeah.
Some players are fully aware that they are creating their own nonsense so that they can succeed. And those are the players in the diary room that are like, I'm lying to them. And that's why we like those players the most. And the players in the diary room that are like, no, I am the best person in this house. I am like the morally superior. We're kind of like, okay, well, we don't like you as much. But I think a lot of that is happening here. A lot of that is happening here. And so I think that's part of why also that Big D feels like, well, Kyland is the more deserving. I thought that's what we were doing, Xavier. And Xavier is at least, you know, one level more self-aware than I think the other players at this point, in terms of like that rhetoric. And he's like, sure, but strategically it's better if Kyland leaves.
Right.
I mean, and so he is able to convince Big D that it's time to cut Kyland.
Yeah, because I mean, I feel like, yeah, if you think about Big D from a strategic standpoint, anything that he's been thinking about or having conversations with people within the cookout was to get the cookout to where they are. So now that they're in a point where they're having to, like, you know, look out for their best interest, which in this case is Xavier getting the win and Xavier directing Big D to do this. It's like, whoa, this is new. And like you said, this is outside of what, you know, I thought we always walked on the right side of the road. Now you're trying to cut around the sidewalk. What? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it happens. Big D evicts Kyland, and Kyland has no illusions as to where this came from. And he goes straight for the jugular with Xavier in one of the most dramatic exits in the history of the show, calling out Xavier for not being a good role model to his, I believe, nephew at the time, have his brother having just passed, and him really feeling like he needed to step up for his nephew. And it was quite a low blow from Kyland. And Xavier handles it very well. Julie is freaking out.
Kylan.
Yes, as being pointed out in the chat, there is a series of screenshots of my face as I reacted to this live that has made the rounds, and it was quite dramatic, and I think that many people sort of had the reaction to this that was, yeah, Kylan, what did you think was going to happen?
He's only mad he didn't think of it first. That is it. Like, he's mad that he put all his what do they call it in poker? All his chips on Xavier, saying we're going to make history and go there together, and we're going to be so strong, and we're going to have two strong men in the final two. And the fact that Xavier's like, nah, I think I can win against Ozzy and Big D. Like, he wouldn't be mad had he had the thought of like, okay, when we get to a certain point, I need to cut Xavier. Like, and was able to do it. Then he would be like, hey, game recognized game. Hey, but the fact that he was played so hard that he had to resort to calling out his nephew, that was, yes, the most dramatic moment of the season. Like that. Oh my gosh. That was, I mean, it was pure entertainment, obviously, from our perspective. It was the lowest of lows that Kylan could go. But that just shows you the depth of the betrayal that he felt.
Yeah. So that brings us to our final three of Azah, Big D, and Xavier. Now, again, once you get here and Xavier wins part one and Azah wins part two of the final three HOH, and Azah and Xavier are going to face off in part three, all of a sudden you start thinking, guys, Azah is one part three away from winning this entire game, because all she needs to do is bring Big D, and Azah is our winner of season 23. Isn't that wild? We've thought it's a foregone conclusion for Xavier, at least I have for quite a while. All of a sudden, Azah is really in here with a chance, especially because, like, you know, she's kind of recently discovered that like, you know, Big D and Xavier, they were all doing all this stuff. She's mostly heard at Big D, but like you'd assume she'd maybe even want to take Big D at this point. They've been closer throughout the season, and he just for sure loses a jury vote to her. You lose a jury vote to anyone. Now, you know, was she likely to win part three? No. Given the competition and the way that, again, part three has been changed over the last few years, I believe I had a stat that was like the person who has won the final four HOH has gone on to win part three or something along those lines, like every single time or close to it. So I was like, Xavier is very likely going to win. But hey, there's some intrigue left, which is maybe Azah wins part three and ends up winning the entire game. And then Azah was like, no, actually, I plan to take Xavier if I win. And I was like,
oh. And
again, you can listen to sort of Azah's perspective on this, which I think is completely valid. For me at the time, I was just kind of like, really?
Yeah.
Like, surely you see yourself as a really deserving winner that would represent the season well, right? Like you would win. Like, you have a win. Okay. But again, the priorities are not the same, and my perspective is not her perspective.
Yeah.
But once we knew that she planned to take Xavier, at that point, it was like actually locked for sure. The season has ended. Xavier has won the game.
Yep. Which, good for him. It is interesting to think about, you know, if she had actually won part three and taken him, would she have gotten, like, would it all have been unanimous?
Probably, right? I can't think of a vote for Azah. Maybe Brittany.
Yeah, Brittany. Yeah. Not Big D, obviously, because he was willing to cut her, but yeah, maybe Brittany.
I think Brittany probably votes for Azah. But yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah. And then we got our first black winner in a proper US season.
Yes, Xavier, the king of the season, and the first black winner of the regular seasons in the U.S., winning
the way.
unanimously.
Now we have, well, more than one. I don't know why I said I don't know if I was like, are we a spoiler? I don't. It's not a spoiler because it's already happened.
I would love to know if there's anybody who's been following along these podcasts and hasn't watched any of the seasons and is just consuming Big Brother via the retrospective podcasts.
I actually do have a coworker who started from the beginning, and she's on like season 12 now, and she doesn't know anything about future seasons. So people like that exist, but not that are like listening to the retrospective.
So there it is. I mean, I think a fairly successful cast in terms of being on other shows. Obviously Derek X and Claire being on The Amazing Race. Derek X himself, I think, was on The Challenge. Xavier went on The Challenge, went on Reindeer Games. I think did another show.
Anonymous.
Yeah, that one. Kyland, of course, has I think a bit of a run on The Challenge. So yeah, quite a bit.
Travis does YouTube stuff with Derek X. Brittany has a pretty successful like social media following, like influencer life. This cast really. Alyssa, did you say Alyssa went on The Challenge?
She did, yes.
Yeah. So they're really out here doing stuff. Big D, he's on Twitter. No, but Big D and Tiffany have a podcast that they have been very consistent with. So Tiffany was on The Challenge US. Yes, the chat has pointed out. So yeah,
Tiffany does all kinds of fun stuff.
Hannah, you know.
Yep. So with that in mind, Aysha, we now have to answer the question: who's on the poster?
So okay, like I said up top, it would not be
obviously. Well, let me just answer for you. Frenchie, Brent,
easy, Brent,
and
Whitney.
Travis.
Oh,
I almost went Whitney, but then I decided Travis would be more.
Yeah. If I had to think within the cookout, yeah, because it's tough. Like, how do you do 2 from the cookout and then 1 from somewhere else? Like, I mean, you could, but this is the cookout season. So if you're thinking like some combination of X, Kylan, and Tiffany, right? Maybe not all 3. So maybe if you think you have to have the winner, or if you're like Brittany Haynes and you forgot about X, then maybe it's Kylan, Tiffany, and Derek X.
I like the world where Brittany Haynes controls the posters, because in that world, Kathy is replacing her on the Big Brother 12 poster, and on this poster, Xavier would not be on it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think the only non-cookout members that could potentially be on the poster would be Derek X or Claire.
I'm seeing a lot of Derek X in the chat.
Okay, yeah. So, but yeah, definitely within the cookout. Yeah, it's just like, I think in another season, Hannah could really stand out. But I think in terms of like in the context of the cookout, it has to be Tiffany and one of Kylan or Xavier.
I think Tiffany and Xavier have to be locked. I think that they are, Xavier, the first black winner, ultimately, despite Kylan's influence, is going to outplay Kylan. And so, I think that Xavier is just locked. I think Tiffany is obviously locked. The third person could be a number of people, I think.
Yeah. This is what I imagine. You have the 6 cookout members, and then below you have a picture of Derek X and Claire.
Do they, like Raven before them, have like a puppet strings?
Right. And then it has like a little picture of a world right next to Derek X and Claire, so everybody knows they went on to be okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can go to robswebsite.com/BB retrospective to vote for who you think should be on the poster for Big Brother 23. And in the meantime, I will be back next week to talk about Big Brother 24. Quite a wild one. That one is. Oh boy.
Yeah. It would be cool if Taylor was on to talk about it.
I do not think we will have Taylor on for season 24. No, I don't think we currently have that in the works. But we will certainly talk about Big Brother 24. Only 3 seasons left. 24, 25, 26, and then 27 starts.
That's wild. Yeah, I was sitting here trying to think about the poster for 24, and I obviously Taylor. But I'm at a
the thing about
loss.
Taylor being on for the 24 retrospective is that there's already a better version of it, which is the deep dive of Taylor.
Oh yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's really hard to think about who else would be on that poster. I just have blanked on like half the cast, so.
Fair.
Oh, Michael and Joseph. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Well, tune in next week for that. And yeah, in the meantime, check out my YouTube channel. I'm reacting to the Genius Game UK. I also started a Patreon where I'm reacting to the Devil's Plan over on Netflix. These very interesting, complex games where there's lots of fun sort of interactions to react with and analyze in the moment. Check that stuff out. And check out all the stuff we're doing over at We Know Scripted as well. The Tastemakers talking about all kinds of shows and stuff like that. Asia, what do you got going on?
Yeah, so y'all can give me a follow at Asia Like Asia. That's AYSHA like ASIA. I've actually been podcasting every week, but where, you may ask? On me and Jason Reed's Patreon for a perfect match. So we'll continue to cover the main episodes for Married at First Sight on RHAP, but in this long off season we have, we've been covering random things like old seasons, ranking things. So if you are into Married at First Sight, I've seen a couple of our patrons in the chat too, so which is really cool. But if you're into Married at First Sight, just go find us at A Perfect Match Podcast, and we're having a lot of fun over there.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us then. Wait.
Also, if you missed it, I have an episode of The Pride Has Spoken out. Go listen to that. Had a great time talking to Grace, Matt, and Evie to kick off Pride Month. So if you have not gone and listened, go check it out.
All right. Well, thank you then again for joining us here today. And we will see all of you next time.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.